they are multilingual. They come with many languages.
There's some talk now, isn't there, on translanguaging as well, and that's kind of linked onto that. And especially with, I would imagine you've met them too, so many TCKs, third culture kids.
The translanguaging aspect is fascinating and something that I believe moving forward will be explored even more in international contexts.
Today I'm here with Gemma Donovan, who is head of Whole School EAL at Southview School in Dubai. And with there being so much talk about inclusion and personalized learning, and as an advocate of inclusion myself, I wanted to talk to Gemma about her thoughts on this. So Gemma, can you introduce yourself and tell us a bit more about what you do?
Firstly, thank you for inviting me onto your podcast today to talk about EAL. As you said, I'm Gemma Donovan. I've been in the field of EFL for the past 20 years. I'm a language graduate myself, so I studied Spanish and Italian at university, after which I went to live in Italy for 15 years, where I taught at the British Council and on various CLIL and bilingual projects for the Ministry of Education over there. Also had a stint in Hong Kong, and then in 2018, I moved over to Dubai with my family. Worked initially at the Ministry of Education, working on the Vision 2021 programme. I was a leader across a couple of schools, a network of schools for the EMI department, so English as Means of Instruction. And then last year I moved across to the private sector, and I've been working as head of EAL since then, heading up the EAL department. As you're aware, probably in the same with you, in our region at the moment, there's been a big influx of students who are at the beginning of their language journey. So a lot of schools are looking at their inclusion departments and looking to expand and provide that EAL specialist provision. So I've been in the field of EAL specifically, shall we say, in this branch for nearly 2 years now. So
that's really fascinating. And I would imagine you've had a similar experience where EAL in the Gulf region is so different to what we experienced, back in the UK. You thought you'd seen EAL and you come out here and it's an entirely different experience.
Well, I think in the international context, we can lose sight when we talk about British curriculum schools, American curriculum schools, that fundamentally in many of our schools, the majority of our students are EAL. My definition of that being that they are English as additional language speakers, so their home language would be another language other than English. What we look at as an EAL department are our ELL learners, so our English language learners. I would say there's a difference between the two in that when we look at our school as a whole, the majority of our students are all EAL students. So a lot of the techniques and strategies that we implement with our ELL students, I am an advocate for them helping everybody within that classroom setting, within our international context.
That's really fascinating. I love the fact that you made these, there's a difference between EAL and ELL. Something, to be honest, talking to you, it's the first time I've come across that. And that's really, how did you come up with, was there a set of criteria that you've come up with to differentiate those two categories of students?
No, I think within our field, as language acquisition specialists, we know that EAL is all encompassing, but we're looking at the ELL learners are those who are at the early stages and progressively growing stages of their language acquisition. I mean, there is a movement now, well, not now, but there has been of late for multi-language learners. That is how they should be addressed, MLLs. To recognise the multilingual facet of our students as well, because often, they're not just learning English as an additional language, they are multilingual. They come with many languages.
Some talk now, isn't there, on translanguaging as well, and that's kind of linked onto that. And especially with, I would imagine you've met them too, so many TCKs, third culture kids, who have already got a number of languages during their journey before they settled here and are learning English. And it's not something we can turn a blind eye to.
I think the translanguaging aspect is fascinating and something that I believe moving forward will be explored even more in international contexts. That our English language learners shouldn't be seen as separate entities that are being taught in intervention classes until they're ready to access the mainstream curriculum. They are multilingual learners who can use all of the tools in their box, so to speak, to access the curriculum. So, I've done learning walks in the past and watched students from the back of the classroom, the amount of information that they have to take in and the tools that they use in order to access that information. They're very talented students who are really making the most of their whole language repertoire, and we should celebrate that, I believe.
I like that idea of celebration as well. I was doing a lesson the other day and we were doing verb conjugation. So I wrote the verb in English in its past, present and future form, but I had some Indian students in there. So I said, I'm not a specialist here, so can we get someone to come to the front and write that verb out in Hindi? So they did. And then I said, right, I've got a bit of an Arabic background, so I wrote it then in Arabic. And suddenly you had the same word in three different languages, in three different forms. And what I loved was the fact that the students were so enthused by it because they're like, oh, wow, that's our language on the board, and we're learning through that. And it helped them just to make those cognitive connections in a way that me just talking in plain English wouldn't have allowed them to make.
Absolutely. And also I think it gives, when we talk about inclusion, it gives value to the cultural heritage. Our languages, our home language is such a fundamental part of who we are. It's our identity that we should recognise it within the classroom. And I think when we welcome our, let's call them ELL learners for now, when we welcome our ELL students to the school in our context, to welcome them in their own language, to acknowledge and show interest in where they're from, I think is fundamental for them to settle in, for them to feel welcome, for them to feel part of the community, and for them to know that everything that they're coming with is valued. It's not they're starting from scratch. They're actually just adding to their already rich language repertoire.
Yes, I could talk to you for ages about this, but I know you're very busy, so I thought I'd start you off on our set of questions. And my first question was, what inspired you to pursue a career in education, specifically focus on language acquisition? And I'll start that again. I could talk to you for ages about this, but we do have a set of questions I wanted to move on to. So my first question was, what inspired you to pursue a career in education, specifically focusing on EAL and EAL learners? What guided you to make that move?
I am a language student myself. I have always been fascinated in speaking other languages and learning about new cultures through language. So after graduating in Spanish and Italian, I moved over to Italy, where I lived for many years. I was also able to hone my language skills as well, being fully immersed in the culture. And then from there, I went on to do my master's. I suppose just throughout my career, then I worked at the university in Liverpool as well for a certain amount of time with the pre-sessional students. So seeing colleagues with a lot of knowledge beyond a CELTA or CELT-YL or Delta qualification really spurred me on to want to further my studies as well. And it was from there, really, that was 2017, I graduated with the master's, that I really took a keen interest in language acquisition specifically. It was no longer just teaching English, it was how do we learn language? And I found it fascinating. And as I say, I've been in the UAE now since 2018 and been able to put that into practice, especially now in the EAL field, because as I said earlier, I think a lot of inclusion departments with the growth of EAL have found themselves with a role that not necessarily are they specialist in. So to be able to collaborate with colleagues within the department and within the school or the wider school community and share my background as well and put it to use within the context of the school environment has been really, really fulfilling, if nothing more.
I agree. And coming out here, I had some grasp of Arabic, but in my first school, I've been at it for 10 years now, and I worked in 3 different schools. And in my first school, the majority of students were from an Arab background. And I thought, if I'm going to try and build bridges here, I'm going to have to do some work myself. So while you're a language expert, I wasn't. So I started, I've got it here actually, quite strangely to hand. This was my Arabic studying course book. It's using language. And I started learning Arabic with that. And it's so intense, Arabic as a language, because you've got multiple verbs for the same action. You know, it depends on the context, and every verb has a different form. Like just sitting, you know, you've got jalasa, yajlisu, ijlis, la tajlis, majlis, julus, and that just means he sat, he is sitting, he will sit. The sitter, the place being sat upon, right? The place where the people sit. Yeah, and I was so overwhelmed, but like you, I tried to build my repertoire of language, because I thought that's the only way I could make some connections with them, because it's, having studied a little bit of Spanish at school, it's so different from European languages that I had to start from scratch.
Well, similarly myself, as I said, I worked in the Emirati local system for the first years that I was here. So I was dealing with Emirati boys from cycle 1 to cycle 3.
Yeah, what was that like?
It was fascinating, because again, it was my first time in this region. So to be fully immersed in that way in the Emirati culture, which is so different to what we see from the outside with the bright lights of Dubai and that side of the tourist Dubai, shall we say. It was very nice to be able to be a part of the local Dubai as well. So I feel privileged to have been a part of that, in all honesty. It brought its own challenges, like any school system does. I think we know they're very, very ambitious over here. So to make the school system more or less entirely in English is no mean feat. And, you know, that brings its own challenges, as I say, but it was a fascinating experience. And I was across a network of schools. I met many colleagues from all around the world. So again, that was an education in itself for me. So I was working and mentoring teachers from Jordan, Egypt, who were teaching maths through the medium of English. And it was neither the teacher's first language nor the students', but that was the medium through which we were teaching. So yeah, that also really fueled my enthusiasm again for in the field.
Okay, well, thank you, and thank you for highlighting that as well. Working in this region does present you with unique challenges, wouldn't you say?
Yes.
What would you say are some? What would you say were some of those challenges? From my side, having studied this, when I met the Qataris after that, they said, "Oh, no, that's like Shakespearean Arabic. We don't really deal with that. We have our own dialects." I'm like, regional dialect? What's that? That wasn't in the it wasn't in the pack.
It wasn't in the book.
Yeah, it wasn't in the book, and you know, this comes with CDs and everything. So then I said, "Well, what's that?" They said, "Sir, we have a regional dialect in the Khalij, and it's entirely different from." They said, "Sir, do you speak with 'Art thou good?'" I said, "No." They go, "Exactly. That's classical Arabic. We have regional variations, which also differs, as you know." And so then I had to try to come to grips with that. But what were the challenges that you faced?
I was kind of aware of that initially through my experience of living in Italy, because I'd learned Italian at a university. I went to live in the south of Italy.
Oh, that must have been beautiful.
It was wonderful. I had 10 amazing years living in Naples and 5 further south in Salerno. But again, it's divided into regions, and each region has its own dialect, and the southern dialect of Naples is very strong. So when I was told here that there are also variations, it all made sense, so to speak. So yes, I've tried to learn a little bit of Arabic, enough to get by within a classroom setting, but I think it also does go a long way. It's nice to greet Arabic speaking colleagues, you know, as best as I can, with a sabah khair and assalamu alaikum. I try my best, because I think it goes a long way. We shouldn't expect that. We're in an international context, and we're guests here as well, so we shouldn't expect everybody to be speaking in English. Although that is often the case, it's nice to show some willing as well, I think.
That's amazing. That's so wholesome as well. And I had a very similar experience. Okay, question 2. how do you approach curriculum development and instructional strategies to support let's say ELL students throughout the whole school where you're working now?
Well, we started off, as I say, we're a new department, so to speak. So we started off with professional development, introducing the department, introducing who our EAL learners are. How do children learn language? Let's put ourselves in their shoes and really think beyond the student who arrives at the door, who perhaps at times teachers can say, oh, they don't speak any English, what do I do? Let's look at the person behind that and really that was the first PD that we looked at, and then looking at strategies to use within the classroom, scaffolding, using visual support. Something I'd like to work further on with across the whole school is having a language element to the lesson as well. I know that teachers can sometimes shy away from that because they're not language experts, but just having an awareness of what language students are going to have to use in order to access the task, and where difficulties or errors may be made, and where there might need to be some explicit instruction, whether it be in the past and just highlighting that, you know, there are irregular pasts that they might need to use, and different past tenses that we as native speakers take for granted, but just highlighting that. And really, I suppose, thinking, like I said earlier, beyond just ELL, and thinking of our demographic, that they are EAL and they will all benefit from those strategies, from the scaffolding, from communicative activities. As I say, pairing our students who are on an earlier language journey with stronger students, not always putting them together in their same groups, although that can help and give support at the start. It's research proves that we improve by being stretched, by being with a more knowledgeable other, so to speak. So yeah, just being very mindful of all those things really when looking at our own curriculum in our pull-out sessions and trying to diffuse that across the whole school really, through PD.
I really like that. I like the, what did you say was language elements?
Yeah.
I think that's really fascinating because myself, yeah, I'm a literature graduate. So my degree and my master's were in literature. And, you know, you can ask me about James Joyce's Ulysses, and I can talk to you forever. But language wasn't my specialty. I didn't do a linguistics degree. So when there is a need for literacy, we often try and include literacy starters. But I think many schools in this region would really benefit from having this language element. Because literacy starter, it's very easy to go down the road of punctuation. However, language element and how it differs from the prevalent language in this region, I think a language element could be really useful for many schools to start considering when it comes to just the start of lessons, you know, and across different subjects. The burden shouldn't be on English subject only. It should be across subjects, you know, a language element.
Exactly, because it is very much linked with literacy, and literacy is across the curriculum. It's, as we know, and it's not subject specific. It's not only English. So really just making, no one needs to be an expert in it. No, I'm passionate about it. I understand not everybody is. However, just to have an awareness, whether that be having an EAL specialist in a planning meeting at the first 5 minutes, just to give a quick scan of what's coming up in the curriculum and highlight any areas that may need explicitly teaching or that may cause some issues. I think that is very beneficial. I also, when I started in this, in the department, when I set up the department, we've got on our OneDrive, I don't know how many teachers have actually used it, but again, we will be making a more concerted effort in the new term. There's a bank of common, let's say, not errors, but where L1 can interfere with the L2. So for Arabic speakers, why they might be making the mistakes that they're making, language transfer really, because in Arabic, perhaps they don't use this. So that's why in English, they're finding it difficult to use a certain tense. Similarly,
Yeah.
our Russian speakers, sounds that they might find difficult because they're not part of their, their pronunciation. So really just having an awareness of who we're dealing with, why they might be having those difficulties, and really going back to the home language to be able to tap into that as well.
It's going to sound a bit like a mouthful, but I think language transference misconceptions. It's a bit of a long title, but yeah.
It is, yeah. It is this language transfer. I mean, it's a thing. It's as I say, I have a comprehensive bank, not compiled by myself, taken from research that says, you know, students who speak this language may find this difficult in English, or may not be able to use this competently in English, or may need certain things highlighting. And I think that's fascinating for all teachers to be aware of that, because if they're marking writing and there's a recurring mistake, it may be just simply that if that's highlighted, something will translanguaging again, something will connect with the other language, and then it will all make sense.
Because when I came here, I mean, obviously, you know, being in the Gulf, that the air conditioner is is such a important aspect of any room because it's so hot out here. And I would have Arab kids that would say on the AC, you know, or off the AC, close the AC. I'm like, no, you say close the AC. I'm like, why are you guys saying close? And you mean switch off? What switch off? Close. And then I looked into it, and in Arabic, the verbal sentences start with the verb. So the verb is sakar, close. So they can't process this idea of what's turn off, you know, switch off. What's switch off? That's not a verb. Where's the verb? Where's the verb at the beginning of a sentence? And so I think some familiarity with those, like you say, language transference misconceptions could help teachers to go a long way in then tailoring the resources to factor that in.
I agree. I think it's knowledge that we would all benefit from, you know. And I think having studied language, I know that I speak one language. I studied Spanish as well, but I've forgotten. I haven't used it, so I've forgotten it. So I'm certainly not a polyglot. However, I understand how different languages can work and the different sentence structures, and having that awareness can answer a lot of questions of why your students are making certain errors.
Apart from that useful OneDrive link, which I might ask you for actually, could you discuss any successful initiatives or programs that you've implemented or implemented as part of your team with language acquisition and integration among ELL students?
We are currently on our secondary side of the school introducing the Young Interpreters Scheme, which is it's a scheme devised by Hampshire Council in the UK, and it's a buddy system. It's a formalised buddy system, really. We've introduced it on primary in a different manner, not the Hampshire Council one, but this time there's a Moodle platform that you can buy into, and it's 4 training sessions. So we've had student volunteers come to lunchtime sessions, and there will now, at the end of this academic year, be awarded with a badge which will identify them around the school as a young interpreter, a certificate, and really giving them a sense of responsibility and leadership, a leadership role within the school. Now, don't misunderstand interpreter. Their job is not to translate. They don't have to speak the language that the student speaks on arrival. They just have to be a kind and caring member of the school community who is willing to be a point of contact for those students who it's a very daunting experience, often arriving in a new country, leaving all your friends and family behind, especially at secondary school where friendship groups were already established, entering into a new system and not being able to access the language fully yet. So that's really something that I'm looking forward to seeing how it develops in the new academic year. We'll have our young interpreters ready to go, and I'm hoping that will also be rolled out into primary school as well come September. We have an informal buddy system at the moment where teachers buddy students up. We have the buddy bench outside where they can sit, but I think we can still work on that. And it's exciting to think that students want to be a part of it. And again, I think it promotes well-being and all of those positive things that we want to promote within the school community, which we already do well. But I think with our ELLs, we can really hone that student leadership role.
I think that's amazing because it empowers the young people as well, and it takes away from this idea that the teachers are the person that we should always only ever turn to know something. And like you said, you're not making them translators, but you're just making them as a point of contact, someone that a newcomer could just turn to, and they often find it less daunting to turn to a peer compared to an adult.
And as I said, the role is very well defined. It's not that we have our wellbeing hub. If they have issues that go beyond, simply things to do with curriculum or school life in general. However, I do feel having those identifiable students around the school will be a real give a sense of support to these students when they arrive. So I'm hoping that on admissions, everything will be shared with them and they'll be told, and please feel free to approach anybody who has these badges, and in assemblies. And I suppose it takes away from them the us and them. They're already integrated straight away from the start.
Talking about collaboration and initiatives, I wanted to ask you, so putting the students aside, what about classroom teachers? What's, in your experience, what are some effective ways to collaborate with classroom teachers to support EAL students to achieve academic success?
Well, I have to say, Aslan, when I started at the school, I did start all guns blazing, and I think I realised that you have to take smaller steps to approach how you would like things and collaborations to take place. So I've been very fortunate to have very supportive staff, very supportive line manager as well, our head of student support. So I started off on primary, really, early years primary. That was where our biggest cohort was. I've been privy to meetings, as I said, with PD also. We have an open door policy, office hours where anyone can come in and ask for advice. And I would like to think of built up a very comprehensive bank of information on the OneDrive as well. That wasn't there before. So that line of communication has been opened. And on secondary, similarly, through learning walks and mini projects, this year I was involved in an action research project, which was a really fascinating part of, which I think will be developed further on in our school moving forward, which allowed me to collaborate first with the science department on a small project with one of the classes on front-loading vocabulary and just analysing, if we were to do that, how before an assessment at a pre-topic task, what effect would this have on student engagement and attainment? And my view is that through working with one department, then in PD, and being able to say we collaborated together, hopefully then other departments will say, well, actually, somebody's not just telling me what to do, they're saying what they've done, how they did it, and how it can work across departments. And I think that's really important. We've also taken part in collaborative PDs where, again, it shouldn't be me delivering PD. There's excellent practice on the ground. So really tapping into that and having colleagues share what they've been doing and facilitating PDs really. That's really what I'd like to do. Put it out there, see what's happening on the ground, and then put it back on the teachers. They're fantastic practitioners and colleagues like to learn from colleagues. So that's, I think collaboration is key for in any school environment, but for this to work as well in the ELL programme.
It sounds to me, Gemma, that you took a mentoring approach. So coaching is, I had a discussion with a coach, and she defined for me the difference between a mentor and a coach. So the coach will help to draw out the answers from you, because then you decide what your pathway is. But a mentor will say, these are my experiences, and what can you take from it? And both of those approaches are non-judgmental. They're not like you weren't the language Ofsted, right, I've come to assess your level of language teaching now. It was more of a mentoring approach, and I think that's what really sold it and helped bring people on board as well.
I hope so. As I say, it is a work in progress. I'm hoping to develop on that as well moving forward. However, I think when, as I said earlier, when colleagues see tangible results amongst their own peers, so to speak, then that's when you can really sell something and get a whole school buy-in, I suppose, at that point. So yeah, and I enjoy collaborating. I enjoy working with the different departments, and I have a very good team. It's not just me. I have I feel I have to say this because it's so true. I'm leading on the department, but I have a fantastic group of people behind me, LSAs, EAL teacher, who are really doing the work on the ground. So I'll facilitate the collaborations, and then we work together then as a team, making these work.
Yeah, because there's always that thing when it comes to management, isn't it? If I leave, would the initiatives continue? And if you suddenly decide to just oh, well, I'm going to retire, I'm going to do this, whatever you wanted to do. If you were to extract yourself, and it sounds to me like in your school, they would absolutely continue because you built up your team and culture in your school so that it would.
In my small way, I hope that I've contributed to that, certainly within my field. As I say, we've set up in such a way that we do pull out interventions. We have a system in place. We have an assessment tracker in place. I've put things in place in such a way that we have all of it's facilitated our LSAs, I hope, for them to be able to conduct their lessons. And I hope inspired them as well. Like we have one of our LSAs went away and did her CELTA last summer, which was fantastic. So if you can inspire people to be interested in the subject as well, beyond the knowledge that they already have, I think that's important too.
With August coming up, there'll be a whole influx of teachers coming into the region, and they're going to meet these ELL students. What advice would you give to educators who are new to teaching students from this region in this context?
First, patience is key. I think now, after a full academic year, our teachers on the ground would say openly, wow, I can't believe the progress they've made. But I would also say that they would reflect back and say, I was really worried in week one because that I didn't really know what was going to do with this child. Not in all the cases, please don't misunderstand me with that. But I know for some, it can be quite overwhelming. Oh gosh, we've got a student in my class. We're in year 6 or we're in year 10, and how are they going to access what we're doing? So I suppose be patient. You will see rewards and in the fruits of your labour, so to speak. And that collaboration is key. Work with your student support team, work with the EAL team, and ask questions where possible. Do extra PD. There is, I think, even in the UK now, with the demographic changing so much and there being so many EAL students.
Yeah.
Every teacher now should be equipped to be able to change their lessons, adapt their lessons in such a way that it's accessible to everybody. And I think we're making great strides towards that. So yeah, patience is key and collaboration is fundamental.
That's amazing. Great pieces of advice. And I agree that all teachers do need to now equip themselves with the necessary toolkits to be able to help students on their language journey, because what we're fighting against is social media, because social media puts bad media out there, not content-wise, but I've seen posts on TikTok and so on with the homophones all wrong, all over the place. I'm like, in the past, the media, with BBC and so on, wouldn't put anything out there with a single comma out of place. Whereas now social media, it's like the rules are all up in the air. So that's what we're trying to, fighting against almost.
We have to be good models of language as well, I suppose. And especially again in the international context, just be mindful of the language that we're using, colloquialisms, idioms, speaking very fast. Just be mindful of who the demographic of our classrooms really.
Okay, well, final question, which was, as head of Whole School EAL, what are your visions for the future of EAL education at your school and beyond?
I suppose what we will move towards is personalised learning, AI, and we're surrounded by it all the time now, aren't we? With apps on the phones that students can talk to and things like that. However, I still am a strong believer in language being as a social construct. So we have to focus on relationships and allowing our students to feel welcome within the schools and celebrating language, inclusion through representation, all the languages represented across in a classroom context within our international settings, and really embracing the international, which we do, I think, very well already, but I think moving forward, this will be even more so in terms of language, embrace the international side of our school settings. And as I say, show that every language matters, it's important, they can use it, use every tool in your toolbox, and I'm sure then we're making strides towards very inclusive classrooms in this sense.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much for your time, Gemma. I really, really appreciate it. And I didn't think on a Friday afternoon I'd be talking about linguistics, but here we are. And I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Aslam. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.